Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. It's Wednesday. This is the day where we review some of the cool new things that have come out in the worlds of progressive rock, hard rock, heavy metal, classic rock, jazz fusion. That's what we cover here. And today, to help me out in this particular episode, is none other than Sean Tonar from In the Prague Seat and also his own channel, Soul Night Live. What's happening, my friend? How are you today?
That's SOAL.
Right.
I'm doing well, Pete. Thank you for having me on today. I think everybody's been really excited about this particular remaster and reissue.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, this is Gentle Giant Freehand, right? So this is right in the middle of the pack of all their albums. And this one's got the wonderful magic of Mr. Steven Wilson, who has done the remixing on this. So as Sean is displaying, it looks like we've got pretty much
yeah, this is the stereo version. It comes in several formats.
yeah.
The Dolby Atmos, which I'm not particularly familiar with, but I hear it's really interesting and kind of different. And like a 5.1 mix, of course.
Yeah. So this is what we got. So
Got options.
I've got the
Like
CD and the
Blu-ray and
Blu-ray.
vinyl.
Yeah, it's on vinyl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's I think 5 different versions of this, and I mean, you depending on what you like, what your configuration of choice is. The Blu-ray that I have, and I think this is also available on DVD, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really sure. This has so this is the 2021 Steven Wilson remix. So you got the Dolby Atmos mixes, which Sean mentioned. You've got the album mixes in 996/24 stereo. Master Audio 5.1. You got the instrumental mixes in 96/24 stereo, the original 1975 album mix in 96/24 ratio stereo, and then the original 1975 quad mix in DTS HD Master Audio 4.0. All right, if that's not enough, well, there's other versions where you probably get more. So, I mean, let's talk a little bit about Mr. Wilson, who has seemingly made a second career out of doing this sort of thing for a lot of these classic prog bands. And for a guy who always seems to want to shy away from prog, he's been pretty involved for the last decade and a half or so.
Yeah, well, I think he owes an enormous debt of gratitude to the progressive rock world,
Yeah.
even if he wants to shun it later in his career. We know who buttered his bread for the past couple decades.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, and
and in the process, yeah, he's done some fantastic remixes. I have mixed feelings about these. It's like I feel like some albums are just kind of impossible to improve on. Like the mix on Fragile, I think is one of the best sounding Yes records ever. So it's really hard to improve that.
right.
But other ones like Tales and Relay are needed it bad. So, in that case, yeah, bring it on.
Yeah,
There's lots of room to improve, but other ones, yeah,
yeah. I mean,
there's perfection's hard to improve on. And
it
a few
is.
things
And he's worked on a
just
lot of these classic albums, right? That most people would say didn't really need any reworking on, or, I don't know. For me, Aqualung, I thought sounded great. I think he did a fantastic job on Aqualung. I like some of the King Crimson ones he worked on quite a bit. And if you listen to the some of the things he's done with Gentle Giant on the God, what the hell was it called? Drawing a blank on that everybody knows. He worked on some of the early stuff like 2 years ago. Or
the 3-piece suite, the one
yeah,
where they had stuff from the first 3 albums but didn't have tapes for all of them, so they
right.
made a nice
That's it.
compilation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounded great. So I think when I listen to some of these remixes, and you're absolutely right, there's some of them that the originals were absolutely just fine. Maybe didn't, but there are people who like to hear little variances. But how much can folks actually hear that's much different? I guess is the question. And that's whenever
Well,
I
true,
listen
and
to him. Yeah, it's
I think the draw with him is the surround mix.
yeah,
That's what everybody wants. And the stereo mix is kind of a secondary worry. And you get a stereo mix, but I don't really think that that's really why people call him. They call him because they want a fantastic surround mix,
yeah.
and then for everybody else that doesn't have that sort of setup, the stereo is good. So I think it's better to judge his work by the surround ones. The
True.
stereos are a bit of an afterthought, I think, although a lot of them are really, really good.
Yeah, they are, and there are on a couple of these, and this one in particular, I think as well. Although Freehand was a pretty dynamite sounding album to begin with, that I don't really think needed much improving.
I
But
agree.
I'm very familiar with this album. It's always been one of my favorite Gentle Giant albums. But listening to the various mixes on here on the Blu-ray through my home theater system, there is a kind of crackling. I don't even know how to describe it. Every little detail seems to be clearer and just really like he's spread some kind of pixie dust on this entire album, and it made a great sounding album to begin with even that much greater. Does that make any sense? I don't know. It's hard for me because it's like I don't have like fantastic stereo equipment. I very rarely listen to music on headphones and things like that, so I kind of have to go with and hear what I hear through what I have.
Sure.
And you and I talked offline this whole week about how this album always sounded really good. And are we really going to be able to hear anything different here? And I don't know. I played all the various mixes on here. Yeah.
There
And
you
it
go.
sounds great. And it's just like, and I mean, and some of these songs seem perfect for this type of, remix. Like, man, just the same and on reflection, if nothing else. I mean, you hear every little thing that is going on crystal clear,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's just amazing. All the vocals, all these little musical bits that seemingly to folks who are maybe not into this style of music are like, oh my God, what are they trying to do here? I mean, I don't know if I forget his name. Geez, I'm totally spazzing here, but there's a YouTube guy. He's like a classical composer, and he's doing these like reaction videos now on like heavy metal and prog stuff.
Yeah, his name is Doug Halvorin or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So I just
That's a
happened to
really
see him in
nice
my
guy.
feed. Yeah, he seems it, and his stuff is interesting to watch. So I watched a couple of his videos, and he did a reaction to this like 2 weeks ago, and I was watching it, and here's a guy. He's a classical composer, and he was totally in love with hearing this for the
Oh,
first time.
it's just like watching his brains dribble out of his ears as he listened to it because
It's
it
like
was
it's like
like,
I didn't think rock guys could do stuff like this. I mean, he was just totally in love with this, and that was kind of neat to watch. And that's kind of if I had heard this for the first time, listening to Wilson's new remix here, I would probably be saying the same thing. But I already knew how great this album was.
but can you imagine hearing Gentle Giant for the first time ever? I mean, that's a lot to unpack
It
on the
is. It
first
really
listen.
is.
And I think he
Well,
did
I
a good
mean,
job, all things considered. But that's this isn't this isn't an Iron Maiden album. There's
no,
a little more layers and stuff to grok.
yeah,
So I think he did well on his first listen. But I suggested that he go deep with some of these albums, listen to them for a month, and then come back and really peel the onion and tell us how it's put together. Because this cursory listen, deer in the headlights approach is nice, it's fun, and it beats the heck out of people that don't know about music and just go, "Oh my god, this is amazing!"
yeah,
Give me a break.
yeah. But if that's the only time you're ever experiencing it, then it means nothing, right?
Pretty much. Well, it's
Yeah,
kind of a cursory listen and
yeah,
nothing else.
yeah. But I'm amazed. You know, I've been listening to Gentle Giant now for a couple, 30 years. And I'm frozen. No, there we go. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Um, and this is not the first album I got by them. Three Friends was actually the first album I ever heard and
Me
picked up
too.
from these guys. And I actually started with the very early part of the catalog first, which for a lot of people is kind of like the harder stuff to really get into. But I think over the years, I've generally said, like, if I talk to someone and who's never listened to Gentle Giant before, and I go to recommend an album to start with, this is actually, I think, the best place to start. But it's funny listening to this album, like 5, 6 times over the last 2 weeks, because I'm listening to every remix version on that's available on here. This is a really challenging album too, but it's presented in a way that is accessible. Does that make any sense?
I totally agree. And I think this was probably the first one I heard. I actually didn't hear the album, but you remember the Sight and Sound
Oh
white
yeah. Yep.
DVD?
Yep.
Yeah, that was the first time I ever heard Giant, and and this was pretty much it. Kind of was from that era, So Freehand, Just the Same were on there, and I was just like, these are amazing. This is really unique music, and I love it.
Yeah.
Um, and then that inspired me to go and get all the albums. And I think this one, I don't know. I think like you, I started with Three Friends, and then I kind of got Octopus and acquiring and all those, and then I got this.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is kind of their peak in some ways. I feel like it was kind of the last one where they were really pushing forward, and then the next ones were kind of more of a rehash. I mean, Interview is really good, but it
Yeah.
kind of seems like Freehand Part Two with a little bit of weird shit thrown in on top. That like a Design and some of those other tracks that are just very very dense and kind of difficult to take in on the first listen, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I agree. I
And
totally
then they
agree.
went into their whole kind of wannabe commercial phase, and you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's some magic on here that it's just hard to deny. And I think for anybody watching who has not heard this album, uh, I wouldn't, where to start on this album. I don't know. I personally love the title track, but I would think that like a song like On Reflection really shows just how unique this band was. That
oh,
has
absolutely.
a
But
little bit of everything, because
I
just
think
the same is, we started off with the, just the same has got groove. It's kind of jazzy. It's kind of fun. It's prog, but it's like all these different things. But I don't know. For me, like On Reflection is just a magical little song that's just pure genius. And I don't think I've ever heard anything like it before.
no. Well, I mean, it reminds me of like a kind of Bach vocal chorale, or
Yeah.
canon, where these different, or almost for regular people that maybe aren't into prog, the best example would be like row your boat, where it's a round and everybody, one guy starts it and the next guy picks up, and suddenly it's all spinning around your head, and the whole group is singing these counterpoint melodies.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, what other rock band ever did that? Just these guys,
Yeah.
and maybe ones that heard these guys and were inspired. Like if you listen to the Sweet Fugue on Kevin Gilbert's Shaming of the True, that's obviously a straight up nod to On Reflection and Gentle Giant.
Yeah.
So yeah, pretty rare stuff. And that tune, yeah, that's one of the most special tunes in their whole catalog, I think. There's really nothing quite like it, and it kind of went some new places
Yeah.
that they were hinting at. They kind of did the vocal kind of chorale thing a bit here and there on earlier albums, but this was one that was just straight up written with that in mind. It's all Kerry Minier's writing, and he went and said, "Okay, here's your part, here's yours," and planned it all in advance, and it's
It's
just
very meticulous. Yeah. And
it
it's
is. It is. And I think Just the Same's a really easy one to kind of draw you in. But then when you hear that tune next, it's kind of like, this is something a little different.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think it's just a magical piece of music. And
It is. It is. And they take you on a lot of journeys on this album, which I really like. Freehand, the title track, kind of rocks. That's pretty
it
rocky.
does. And I love that clavinet on that. It really gives it a kind of a funky edge that is just great.
Yep.
Top five Gentle Giant songs
I
easily.
totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. Time to Kill, pretty catchy.
Great one. That's a riff that Derek Schulman wrote on the guitar.
Oh,
So,
really? I didn't know
yeah,
that. Wow, pretty cool.
yeah, actually, yeah. When we were chatting about that recently, he pointed that out, and I was like, "Well, that's a darn good riff."
It totally is.
Bum,
It
bum,
totally is.
bum, ba-doo, bum, bum, ba-doo. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I like that song a lot. It's definitely one of the highlights here. His Last Voyage,
Beautiful.
gorgeous piece.
Carrie vocal on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of his most beautiful tunes.
Yep. Yep. And then finishes off with Talibant and Mobile. And Mobile again, I think, kind of finishes off the album just like it's not similar, but whereas the Just the Same kicks off the album upbeat, jazzy, poppy, proggy, certainly. Mobile also is pretty up tempo, good driving rhythm on that. Great guitar work, keyboards all over the place, and very clever use of vocals. It's just every song on here is just a complete winner.
Right, and it doesn't overstay its welcome either. It's only about 40 minutes long,
Yeah.
and I mean, if you haven't ever heard Gentle Giant, I think this would be a great place to start. Honestly, I think more so than even the earlier stuff, which is a little more avant-garde at times,
Yeah.
a little harder to take in, I think. So I think this would be a great one, and then you could work your way backwards or forwards, but it gets pretty simple pretty quickly, which
Yeah.
isn't a bad thing. I mean, I really like every Gentle Giant albums, even the ones that are more commercially minded. And Derek said that Steven has remixed Interview, so that should be coming up next,
Wow.
which I always felt like was a kind of a companion to this record. As a matter of fact,
Yeah.
sometimes you could buy them on a CD together. And but he said he had much happier memories making Freehand. That Interview was starting to, some of the stresses of being in the band were kind of coming to a head by that
Yeah,
point.
no doubt. No
So
doubt.
this is
So I guess the question is, now that some of us, well, you and I specifically, have this, for those Gentle Giant fans who are still holding out. So we have seen, I've bought the Gentle Giant catalog now a few times, and we had the DRT remasters that Derek released back. Jesus, that like almost 20 years
35th
ago.
anniversary.
Yeah, I mean, it was a
10,
while
15
ago.
years
We
ago
had
now.
the Terrapin Truckin' stuff. I mean, we've had so many different reissues and remasters on this catalog. So, for folks who maybe haven't taken this plunge yet, is this worth getting just because Steven Wilson has worked on it?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. You know, and I wouldn't have said that initially because at first thought it's like, well, I never really had a problem with the first mix. It was one of their better sounding records anyway.
Yeah,
But now that I've taken the time to kind of compare and do a side by side comparison, I realize that, yeah, it's almost, it's that kind of cliche, wiping a dirty window clean, and suddenly you see everything clearly, without any murk in the way. And I'd
yep,
say that describes this new mix. It's like the other one was good, but it was a little murky at times. And now that's all gone, and everything is, it's like shining a light on every part and everything. You can just hear them all individually. Like listening to the album, it always had a bit of a, I don't know, like it was, there's a lot of layers there, and
oh yeah.
just it seemed like it was all rather densely put together, and it sounded good. But yeah, I think this is definitely an improvement.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely worth having, and I'm very excited about Interview as well because they go hand in hand. I
Yeah, I
think.
always like that record a lot,
Yeah, I
actually.
do. Interview is very strong.
And
I
it seems
think.
like that's the one that always kind of gets lost in the cracks for some reason. Freehand always gets talked about more, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is obviously a superior album, and I think everything after this people tend to kind of forget about. But Interview, I think, is very, very solid. It's not quite this, but it's not that far
But
behind.
it does some things that this doesn't. Like, we got a prog reggae tune on it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's a first for Gentle Giant,
Oh yeah,
definitely.
absolutely. I would say the only thing about this that I'm a little disappointed. I'm a packaging guy, right? So on a lot of these Steven Wilson remixes that we've seen, the Tull, specifically the King Crimson ones. I mean, great packaging. I mean, you get all sorts of cool stuff. When he did when they released the Chicago 2 that he worked on,
Mhm.
again, kind of bare bones, great sounding. They did a fantastic job on that, but the whole thing is kind of flat. There's really, you don't get much with this other than, the discs itself. There's no real story. There's no commentary from him on how, what it was like to work on this album. It's basically, this is what you get. You get the discs, you get a booklet with lyrics, and that's it. Nothing really much else. And I would have liked to have seen a little something extra because I think I got really spoiled with those King Crimson remixes that he worked
Well,
on
that's a good
because those are
point. Yeah.
those are great packages, right? For the collector, because this is not that much different than all the other issues that I already have, right? So it's like I wanted something a little bit more, and then you pay good money for these things,
Well,
but
it's nice when there's a kind of a background that's included also, and that was great about those Crimson ones because they just scraped the vaults and got all these rare photos, and every one of them was almost like a little book that kind of told you about the making of the record,
yeah,
which was interesting. But you know,
yeah. But minor quibble aside, I think it's great to hear it in this presentation. I think he did a very, very good job. So you got it on CD here, you got it on Blu-ray. There's LPs, there's various different configurations. So I would say from both Sean and I, we give this a thumbs up. And even if you've already bought this a couple times, you might want to check it out because it sounds pretty damn good.
Yeah, I think it will surprise you. Put it in the car and crank it up. That's one of my favorite places to listen.
Yeah.
Sounds great in there. And also at Gentle Giant's website, they've got a groovy new T-shirt that goes with it, which I think looks pretty sharp.
Wow.
So,
Is
yeah.
it the album covers or
Yeah,
more?
it's got the hand on the front, and it's kind of a faded gray shirt that almost looks crackled, so it kind of matches the artwork on the cover. So, yeah, it's a pretty neat looking shirt. Kind of almost like you remember Stonewashed.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of almost has that kind of look to it, you know.
I'll go check it out. Not that I need it because I already have a freehand shirt, but that I bought a couple of years
I
ago.
think
But
you're
I'll
gonna
go take
like this one.
I'll take a look. It's not like I don't, it's not like I don't buy a lot of shirts because I
I
do.
hear you.
So we'll see. But there you have it, everybody. I would say, thumbs up from both of us. Freehand from Gentle Giant, the Steven Wilson 2021 remix. Check it out. I think it's worth having. It's quite good. I've enjoyed the 7-8 times I've listened to this so far. I think it sounds pretty spectacular, like just about everything else that he's worked on. So if you're a follower of all the remixes that he's worked on, you're going to want to hear this. If you've never bought freehand before in any version and are intrigued by Gentle Giant, here's the best place to start.
Absolutely, yeah. And I like Steven's. He never messes with things much. He's very respectful of the original mix and just tries to kind of clean it up and make it sparkle a bit, I suppose is the
Yep,
best way
that's
I would
a
put it.
great point.
And,
Great
and
point.
that's good because in many cases you're very used to the original mix and you don't want to tinker with it too much. You just kind of
Yeah,
want to blow the
that was my impression when I first heard his Aqualung, because I've always thought the original Aqualung had I don't know, it was very dense and murky sounding, as
yeah.
great as that album is.
You
And
know,
when I heard his, I was like, wow, that sounds really good.
the neat thing about some of his remixes is that they open the vaults for him. And suddenly, like Aqualine, he got a hold of the original tapes for all those tracks. Because in back in the old days, they only had 8 tracks, so they would record the drums and the guitars and all that, and then bounce them down to 2 tracks, and then add more. Well, he was able to get everything pre-bounced, and that's why Aqualung sounds so amazing now
Yeah.
because he got his hands on the original tapes before there was any bounce. Because every time you bounce, you get a little tape hiss. The quality degrades a tiny bit. So if you can get a hold of the original tapes before everything was bounced, then you wind up creating the best sounding version of that record ever. And that's what happened with Aqualung. And I think he did it with some of the Crimson as well, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Kudos, Steven Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy knows what he's doing, right? And he's
Yes, he
made
does.
a nice little career for himself doing this sort of thing, and hopefully he will continue. So there you have it, everybody. Gentle Giant Freehand, it's a winner. Sean, what do you got going on over at on your channel?
Not a whole lot. I've done 100 episodes and I'm in a holding pattern. I just got a new job. I'm
Congrats. That's
a
right.
music store here in Atlanta. So I'm going to take a month or two to wrap my head around that. I have a couple shows left on the books. I'm going to chat with Peter Erskine from Weather Report last Saturday of the month. And Jan Ackerman, possibly if we can get our schedules to line up. He's crossing Europe on motorcycle and playing a bunch of dates while he's at it. So if we can squeeze him in, I will. And then, I hope to get back on track in the fall. But in the meantime, I've got 100 episodes. Please swing by and subscribe. It's /soul, SOAL, Night Live, a who's who of prog rock and fusion, and a few classic rockers as well. So, come on by and check it out.
Sounds good. And of course, you can see Sean here on In the Prog Seat a couple times a month. So we've got
Coming up
an episode coming up on Tuesday.
That's right. We'll be talking about our favorite American prog bands, which is, people always think about British first, of course, because they're the ones that really got the ball rolling. But, there's some fantastic American ones that maybe don't get mentioned as often. So we're going to shine the light on them and mention some that you probably might not even be aware of.
That's right. So our favorite
Beyond
pod.
Kansas and Dream Theater and all that, there's a lot more.
There is a lot and some great albums. So we'll be talking about our those bands and albums. So that's coming up on Tuesday. So stay tuned here on the channel. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. 20 years on the internet. So 22,000 plus album reviews, I think, at this point. So yeah, it's a lot. So make sure you go visit the website. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. But of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. That's right. So thanks for watching, everybody. We got, what is today? Today is Wednesday. Coming up, the Monsters Den tomorrow night. So join Rich Catino and Chris Allo and myself, where we will be talking about some of our favorite 70s and 80s exploitation films. That's happening tomorrow night. So stay tuned for that. And then, of course, Martin Popoff is back on Friday morning for a little Friday morning at the Funhouse with the two of us. So stay tuned for that. A lot more here on the channel. For Sean Tonar and Pete Pardo, have a good one, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Well, take care.